Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my Veterans to Success podcast. You probably know by now, my mission is to help 1 million veterans and entrepreneur business owners achieve the dreams, goals, and aspirations they deserve. That is why I created the Veterans to Success podcast, because I get to interview guys, men and women, who want to share their fascinating stories with you about their time before, during and after their time in the military, so you can benefit and overcome your challenges. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be mesmerized, astounded, and entertained. Hello and welcome to another edition of Veterans to Success. And I love spending time with guys who have been in the military and are out on the other side now, because I learn so much and discover the amazing things that they do. Speaking of which, I've got Chris Whittaker with me today. Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Fantastic, sir. How are you?
Yeah, absolutely fabulous. Thanks for asking. And I'm glad you're feeling fantastic too. And so you don't need to be really brainy to appreciate that you're not from the UK. So whereabouts are you in the world?
I am about an hour north of Atlanta, Georgia, just at the foothills of the Appalachian Trail. So yeah, kind of a rural area, but within an hour's drive of a major city and airport.
Wow. That's great. Good stuff. And we've had a good chat and offline quite a few times, and we've pretty much got a handle on each other. And I just the same as with the other conversations I have, I'm really going to enjoy diving into this, because I think there's a lot of synergy that we have. I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can share, knowledge and experience to help the guys listening to improve and get better. So we're going to dive straight in, and there's no airs and graces, there's no big introduction. We just go in, and as we go along, you do a reveal and we find out about you. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Let's do it.
Okay, fantastic. Right, so you weren't always in the military, were you? So you had a time before the military, right? As a child,
right?
What did you get up to?
Yeah, so I was fortunate. I had two great parents. I grew up in Alabama, which is the next state over from Georgia. And unfortunately, at the age of 8, my parents decided they couldn't make it work, and ended up getting separated and divorced. And of course, I had 2 sisters. I was the middle child, and as such, I got to spend a lot of time with my grandfather, my mother's father, and he was a World War II veteran and Korean War veteran. And I was just amazed by this. I feel like I had this American hero in my own family that I get to hang out with. And he had pictures and medals and stuff. And I was just very enamored by that. I just thought it was what a great, way to live your life. So that was a big inspiration for me, obviously. But even before, I ever joined the military. So, I lived my life and lived my mother and sisters mostly, and saw my dad every other weekend, and had a great relationship with him growing up. Still one of the greatest men I've ever known is my father. And, he passed about 10 years ago. So, even in high school, though, the last 4 years of my primary, education there, I was in a program called a Reserve Officer Training Corps, ROTC. In high school level, it's really called Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps. So it's kind of a prep school, a prep class for going into the military. They teach you how to march and how to wear uniforms, and teach you about the rank structure of the Army. So, I really I feel like I had an unfair advantage over a lot of my, fellow soldiers when I went through basic training. So, and basic training, I don't know, that's a whole nother story too, how fast that came upon me.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, I know you just flitted through that really quick, because what I've discovered with all the guys that I speak to, men and women, we always just cut to the chase so we can talk about the military career and stuff and what we're doing now. And quite often we forget to delve in a little bit deeper. So I know you mentioned at the age of 8 that your parents became divorced, and you had a sister who was either side of you from an age-wise. What was going on then, and how did you deal with that, and how did your sisters deal with it?
Yeah, it was a tough time. You're right. I mean, I don't want to make light of it. And I think anytime a family's broken up like that for whatever the reason, it's I can't think of it ever being a good thing. So I mean, yeah, we struggled with it for a bit. I mean, it was for me, it was hard because like I said, I always looked up to my dad too, and in my eyes, he had done nothing wrong, and wanted, I even tried to go live with him for a while, but then I felt guilty that I wasn't with my mom and sisters. When I was young,
Yeah.
I was 8, 9 years old. Um, but fortunately, time went on. We just kind of dealt with it, did the best we could with it, and tried to have quality time with both parents. And it's very difficult. Yeah, looking back, it was difficult, and on a non-military topic, it's even helped form my beliefs on marriage. I've been married 31 years, and I vowed to my wife that Lord willing, I joke with her. I said, honey, if you ever leave me, I'm going with you. And fortunately, she's a much better person than I am. I believe she's just a saint, a great woman. She puts up with my craziness, and yeah, it's been a real match made in heaven, if you will. 31 years, 4 kids later, 3 grandchildren now. So yeah, I'm very fortunate that in spite of a rocky start of my young life, I feel like it kind of got corrected over time.
That's great. That's made me chuckle that. If you ever leave me, I'm going with you. I like that. I'll remember that. Yeah, because I share your pain from a different perspective, like from your father's perspective. Because after I got injured when I was with Special Forces on selection, then and it was a serious injury. After that, I went to a divorce, and we had a 4-year-old son who is a young man now, and then another boy on the way. My then wife was pregnant, so I understand. I appreciate what you're saying, and it's good to get your take on it as well. You being in 2 places, you wanted to be with your dad, you wanted to be with your mum and sisters, and what should you do? And maybe for logistic reasons or just emotional reasons, you went back with your mum. So I can appreciate that. And my son's had that same struggle, I suppose. And then you picked up with your grandfather, and you also mentioned that it didn't damage your relationship and respect with your father, and also your grandfather became a big mentor and coach, I suppose, a World War II veteran, and hats off to him and thank you for his service. I bet you had a few stories.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That in fact, that was a big part of it. I remember, from like age 8 to 12, we would go over on the weekends and visit him. And he was somewhat disabled. He had some shrapnel on his legs that the VA couldn't get out or whatever. And so he wasn't very mobile. I mean, I would spend just sitting on the couch and talking to him, and he would tell me the war stories. I mean, I was a young man. He's telling me some really morbid, terrible, tragic war stories. But I was just fascinated by it. And of course, this, it was kind of going into the early 80s. And, coincidentally, around that time, a lot of the Vietnam War movies started becoming popular. We talked about Platoon and a lot of the Chuck Norris movies and Rambo and all these things. So, between him, those movies, and we also lived in Columbus, Georgia, which is near Fort Benning, now called Fort Moore, I believe. So I was very influenced by that. I mean, even my neighbors were soldiers. I mean, I saw soldiers coming home from work in their uniforms, and so I was just very, in fact, funny little side story. Me and a friend of mine, my longtime friend, I'm still friends with to this day, met him in 6th grade. Keith Young, retired major. We would go door to door to these soldiers' houses and ask them if they had any extra rank or insignia or patches. We would collect them. We would collect all the unit crest and the patches and the pins, and we would put them on styrofoam boards, and we would collect all these unit, citations and medals and anything extra they had. And it was quite a little side hobby of collecting these military insignia.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you share about Rambo and Platoon, because we talked about Platoon, and that
Yes.
was a drastic and engaging film in so many different ways, and it was a tragedy, the things that happened between the infighting between the Americans themselves, and I think that when the Vietnam vet came back to America, they were in a bad place. And the 4th of July, as we talked about with Tom Cruise, how that depicted how they were treated, it was, yeah. I mean, what was going on at that time, and what struggle internally did that give you about joining the military, if any?
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I was aware of that. Yeah, I mean, probably more aware as I got older, but of course, I felt that any of the war protesters that gave the Vietnam vets a hard time out, I'm like, man, they just don't get it. They don't understand the sacrifice, and they don't understand the soldier doesn't choose the wars. The soldiers just go to the war. They go where they're told. If you're going to get mad at anybody, get mad at the politicians that sent them. Yeah, I think that never bothered me because again, hearing, I was had the benefit of talking to my grandfather about it and hearing his side of the story, and that it's like, hey, it's really more about defending our way of living, and a strong defense is better than an offense, or whatever the saying is. So no, that never really seemed to bother me. And again, growing up in the shadows of Fort Benning, Georgia at the time, it was a very patriotic community, because the whole community was made up of military. So I had the benefit of that. I was in a community that was very pro military and very patriotic.
Thank you. And the big day, and I'm not talking about the big day when you passed out with your beret. I'm talking about the big day when you thought, yeah, I don't fancy staying on Civvy Street, really. I'm going in the military. What prompted you to do that? What was going on in your life at the time?
Yeah, well, keep in mind, like I said, I think I'm a little unique. I feel like I am. I think we all think we're unique. But remember, at 12 years old, I told my mother, "Hey, I'm joining the Army." At 12 years old,
Yeah.
and I, you know, made sure I was very physically athletic. I was a runner. I knew I had to be in good shape. So I didn't really have aspirations of going to college and getting into business, or I wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to be like my grandfather. I wanted to be like Rambo. I wanted to be like Chuck Norris. I again went to school, and I graduated on a Saturday, and literally went to boot camp on Monday. So I just had basically
Okay.
24 hours of reprieve, and I was in it, and I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait. I mean, I kept thinking, wow, my job is going to be to go and shoot rifles and throw grenades and blow stuff up and go on these long ruck marches. And I mean, I was so excited about it. In fact, when I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, it was Fort Benning at the time. And you may know we had some craziness stuff, like they changed the names of some of our military bases for whatever reasons. But I mean, I understand some people's feelings about it. I personally don't agree with it. I think, hey, it's still always be Fort Benning to me. But I went in June, and Georgia summers are known to be very hot and humid. And so I'm in basic training June, July, August. It's 3 months, hottest months of the year in Georgia. But I loved it. It was like summer camp for me. I excelled. I went in as an E3 private first class. Most people go in as E1s, just a private. And I got to go in with slight promotion because of my time in the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, because I kind of had this pre-training, so that made me an E3, and I loved it. And man, it was the best summer of my young adulthood, because I got to do everything I dreamed of,
That's fabulous.
including going to boarding school and jumping out of airplanes.
Yeah, so tell me about that. So you what unit did you join?
Well, so I went, funny side story. And this is advice for young soldiers. Young soldiers, I don't know how many would be listening, but so I had a high school sweetheart. Okay. And I'm in jump school. I'm at Fort Benning still, completing the 3-week jump school. And at the time, I was going to go to the Ranger Battalion at Fort Benning. And she was writing me. She's like, Chris, I want to get married. I miss you. I'm 18 years old. And, she was this really good looking brunette. And I'm like, man, I got to get back to her. So I went to the Ranger recruiting office right next to the jump school. Say, hey, look, I don't think I want to go to Rangers battalion now. I just want to go to regular unit so I want to go marry my girlfriend. And they're like, okay, because it was a volunteer, going to Ranger battalion was a volunteer thing. You had to volunteer for it. They're like, well, if you don't want to volunteer for it, we'll just put you back in the regular Army. Again, major mistake. I'm looking back, everything happens for a reason, so I'm very happy where I'm at today. But anyway, so I did that. And of course, in the Army, in their infinite wisdom, when you back out of the deal, their punishment is they send you to like the worst place they can send you. So I went to Korea. I went to the 2nd Infantry Division. That's my first duty station, and got stationed on the DMZ right next to North Korea, and for a year. So yeah, I gave up the opportunity to go to a great elite unit of the Ranger Battalion at Fort Benning. I married my high school sweetheart, and then 3 weeks later got sent to Korea for a year without her. And that's, of course, the marriage didn't work out. I mean, that was my first round, high school sweetheart. Again, I really I thought it'd work out, but God had a better plan. It didn't work out. And of course, I met my current wife 32 years ago, married 31 years. So, 2nd Infantry Division is a long answer. Oh, by the way, the poster behind me, the Band of Brothers series on HBO, that unit that series is about is the 506 Infantry.
Right,
Currahee. Yeah. So my first duty station was the 506 Infantry. So I got to go spend, my first unit was the same unit that series was made about, the Currahees. And Currahees is a Native American word meaning stands alone. And I coincidentally also, I live an hour from where they trained in Toccoa, Georgia. And I've been to the mountain, I've been to the museum. So it's just really interesting how that poster means a lot to me, just because I share in that legacy. I'm a part of that brotherhood of soldiers that fought in World War II. And of course, they were one of the first airborne units. And having been a paratrooper myself, it's a kind of a neat coincidence that my first unit was also the 506 Infantry at Currahees.
Well, yeah, that's thanks for sharing that. And so basically, you got your day John shortly after, what we call a day John, shortly after going to Korea. So you must have been pretty gutted, really.
In what aspect? I mean, after going to Korea and losing my first wife? Yeah. Well, so to continue the story just a little bit, the problems began while I was in Korea. She, a pretty young girl. Neither one of us should have been married at that age of 18. I mean, looking back, it was just a mistake. I mean, I know it works for some people. It didn't work for us. But so I come back from Korea, and then Desert Storm happened. So it was like the summer of 1990. So I come back from Korea. I go to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, the 101st Airborne Division, and we're training again. We went to counseling. We were trying to save it, and then Desert Storm happened. And in August of 1990, I got deployed to the Middle East, and that was the final straw. She's just like, I can't do this anymore. And it made sense, I guess. So I come back from Desert Storm. We wasn't a full year deployment. I think we were there for like 10 months, and come back. And then we just get divorced. I'm like, hey, this clearly ain't going to work. I'm tired of worrying about this. You clearly don't want to be here. And so, yeah, it took me probably, it was tough. It was a hard, especially the first, I think 90 days, the first 3 months after realizing, this thing I thought was going to be for the rest of my life is done. That was hard. Had a good support group. My family rallied behind me. Even her family felt bad. And her mom and dad would contact me and say, I'm really sorry this didn't work out. And now there's so many years ago, I forgive her. I let it go. I'm like, hey, but at the time, I was pretty crushed.
Have you ever wondered what is going to happen to all your knowledge, wisdom, and skills when you die? Yeah, me too. That is exactly the reason why I created joeteam.com. So I can leave a legacy for my children and for other successful people who are just like you. For less than 40 pence per day, you get access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joelteams.com now to find out more. That's JOETEAMS.com, joelteams.com to find out more.
And there's a saying, nothing better to get to mend your broken heart than to find another person, right? So
Yeah.
I probably dated around for a couple of months, and then I get reassigned from Fort Campbell, Kentucky to Fort Myer, Virginia, which is the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment is located, and it's the honor guard for the military district of Washington. So I go from Fort Campbell, still kind of licking my wounds, I'm kind of burned out on relationships. I'm like, man, this is crazy. And mind you, I'm 21 years old at this point, still a young man. And I signed into Fort Myer, Virginia on a Thursday night. Most people know when you're on leave, you wait to the last minute. You sign in at midnight, and you want to milk that time off as long as you can. So I'm at the staff duty desk, signing in right at midnight from leave. And the staff sergeant behind the desk goes, "Whittaker, you married?" I'm like, I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to tell him the whole story. I just said, no, Sergeant, I'm not married. And he goes, "Don't worry, you'll be married within a year." I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. But this is Thursday night. Friday, so I go to my barracks. The Charger quarters gives me a room, and then I meet my squad leader for the first time that Friday morning for physical training. And I kind of do my orientation and my in process, and they call it. That takes some time. But anyway, that first Friday, my new squad's like, "Whittaker, we're taking you out. We're in Washington, D.C., so we're going to these bars and whatnot." And that's where I met my wife that night. Which is funny. The guy was right. It wasn't serious at first, but I met Heather, my first full night in the district. And we ended up getting married, nearly a year later. So even though it was a tough transition, one thing I've always been, my father taught me, my grandfather taught me is, accept your circumstances, control what you can control, and at some point you got to move on. The military teaches that too. It's like, hey, if you're in a crappy situation, things aren't going as you have to you have to reformulate a plan. You got to regroup and attack. So fortunately, I feel like my whole life, even going back to when I was 8 years old, my parents got divorced. I realized real quick, things don't always go as planned. You always have to reevaluate, regroup, and move forward. That staying where you are is just not an option for me. You got to be moving forward.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I remember my mum always used to say to me, and she gave me a card with it on somewhere, and it says something words along the line of have the courage to change the things you can, the humility to accept the things you cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah, and I think that amongst the many other things that she taught me, and my dad, that really sticks in my mind. And the other one, don't quit, ever, never quit.
Yes, that's beautiful, man. I love that. Now I think that's called the prayer of serenity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the one.
I'm familiar with it. And again, that's right up my alley. I've leaned on that prayer for inspiration many times. Yeah.
And so when you were with the Band of Brothers or the 506 Infantry, when did you get your wings? Because you mentioned that you were doing your jump training. When was that?
So yeah, I actually in my contract when I signed up for airborne school. So I went 3 months in basic infantry training, and then right from there went straight to airborne school. So I got my wings before going to Korea. So that was another, you didn't see a lot of private first class walking around with airborne wings in their first duty station. And it was interesting because even though the 506 Infantry was an airborne unit during World War II, the U.S. military, they kind of reclassify and move units around sometimes. So when I was in the 506, it was an air assault unit, not an airborne unit. So even though I was airborne qualified, the 506 Infantry was an air assault unit. It just means that we flew everywhere in helicopters. In fact, we rarely ever did that, to be honest. It was more walking, or we had the Humvee, military vehicles we drove around in for training. But yeah, it was interesting. and on a side note there, it's really funny. They call if you go to airborne school and you get wings, but you don't go to a jump unit, they call you a 5-jump chump. If you're in the U.S. military listening and you're airborne, you know what I'm talking about. So a 5-jump chump just means you went to school and you got the wings. I mean, hey, yeah, you're not a leg per se. A leg, almost a derogatory term for someone that's not airborne. So you're not, but you're not really airborne if you have enough jumps to at least spell the word airborne. You need enough jumps to count for each letter in the word airborne.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I was in it for about 10 and a half years. It's still the best 10 and a half. Yeah, I missed those times. I loved it. Yes, it was hard. You don't make any money. I was enlisted the whole time. But kind of fast forward, we'll jump to the story. Maybe we could come back to the middle. But I actually didn't get to a jump unit until my last duty station in like 1996, and I got out in 98. So I was at Fort Bragg with the 2nd of the 505 Parachute Infantry Regiment. So I finally made it to the big time. I finally made it. So I was like, you know what? It's not Rangers, it's not Special Forces, but it was a pretty cool unit. I mean, they were what we would call high speed, low drag, and some of the best leaders I've ever worked with were at the 82nd Airborne Division. I was very fortunate. I mean, I got to just work with some great leaders. Now, yeah, every unit, I'm sure every military unit, you always have a couple of the bad ones. Even that movie Platoon kind of spotlighted some bad leaders, people that take advantage of their rank or take advantage of their position. I mean, I think the military just it kind of magnifies who you are anyway. So if you go in and you're a patriot and you're a good person, the military gives you a chance to grow in all that. But if you go in and you're a bad person to begin with, it just that's probably not good if they can't change you. But I was very fortunate to at least finally make it to a jump unit. And yeah, there's a whole story about how that ended too, which is it's a good story. I mean, I know I've met a lot of veterans that have bad stories. I met some veterans that are almost angry. They're upset about the way their military ended, and I get that. I empathize with them.
So if we come back to when you get married to your now wife, what was going on then, and what were the challenges with that?
Yeah. Again, this is what I'll say. She's a saint because she knew the whole backstory. And because as I started, I met her, I told you, right when I got to Fort Myer, Virginia, in DC, months after the divorce. I mean, the fact the paperwork was still going through the court system, I believe. And she was very patient, and probably had some forms of all kind of PTSD from the combat, and then the personal trauma at the time. And again, it was pretty devastating at the time. Looking back, I'm like, it wasn't that bad, but in the moment, it was bad, and she was just an angel. She was an angel. She was very patient with me, and she put up with me, and kind of helped me through that period. And then I mean, in fact, I mean, I don't know, 3-4 months into dating, I say, hey, look, this is getting too serious. We need to break up. I mean, I'm not looking for anything serious. And she wasn't happy about that. And so it goes about 3 or 4, maybe a month after that. I mean, what am I doing, man? This woman is awesome. I screwed up. So I called her back and said, hey, I made a mistake. I want to get back with you. She goes, no, you hurt me. No, I moved on. And I'm like, what do you mean you moved on? And so then I kick it into high gear. I'm like, well, I'm going to court her. I'm going to win her back. And maybe a month of trying that, I realized it wasn't working. She's strong-willed enough, and she's like, no, you hurt me. I'm not doing this. I said, okay, well, I love you, but if that's how it's going to be, I'll never call you again. You won't hear from me again. I'll respect you said it's over. It's over. So then like another month goes by, and then I'm on leave again at my father's house down in Alabama, and I get a phone call from her, and she's like, hey, is that deal still, on the table? Do you still want to get back together? I've been thinking about you, and if you're serious, if you really, serious about what you said, we should give it another go. And we did. So yeah, and then I even told her, I said, I'll give it a go, but if we get back together, I commit I am not going to break this up again. That's a big thing to say. I mean,
yeah.
say that, and you don't have a crystal ball, and maybe you shouldn't say that, but so far so good. Going on 31 years, we've been able to keep it on the tracks.
That's brilliant. That's fantastic. Now, you mentioned something that is prevalent in our veteran community, PTSD. So, what was going on with the contact that you had, i.e., contact in a conflict arena?
Yeah. I mean, I consider myself blessed and fortunate. I think on the grand scale of things, it would have been mild compared to what's gone on the last 20 years for forces, the war on terrorism. But as much, from Scud missile attacks, some artillery, and again, the ground war in Desert Storm, if anyone was in it, it was a 100-hour war for the U.S. I mean, it wasn't really a long, drawn out conflict. So I think and we had a few friendly fire accidents. We had a guy was testing his law. Oh my goodness, what was it? The anti-tank weapon, and he was going through safety checks on it, and he accidentally fired it into a crowd of soldiers that were playing cards, and in the rear base. So I mean, at the time, when you're young, you're looking at those things, going, surely that's not going to cause PTSD, but you have dreams about it, you think about it, you question people if they're competent enough. I mean, that's something I struggle with. Is like, when I work with people, I jokingly tell people, I'll put everybody in two categories. I'll either go to war with you or I won't go to war with you.
Yeah.
And to me, I'll go to war with you if you could demonstrate that you're competent, that you're level-headed, you're trustworthy, you have integrity. I can work with anything if you have those categories. But if you show me you're not competent, you're a liar, you have no good moral compass, I am not going to war with you. And to me, once you get in that bucket, it's hard to get out. I mean, and so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But it makes me, have a hard time working with people if I consider them incompetent or not trustworthy. And, so yeah, just recently I went, in fact, this is another plea to my fellow veterans, especially in the U.S. and I'm sure abroad. I didn't go to the Veterans Administration, we call the VA, for 25 years because I kind of dismissed or minimalized the dreams I was having, or maybe losing my temper. I kind of mentalized it like, that's life. It happens. I didn't lose a leg. I didn't have any major scars from conflict, so I don't need benefits. But it was through talking to other veterans, and I have a neighbor across the street, he's a Vietnam veteran, and he was also a counselor for the VA, and he's retired, and he's like, Chris, you need to go talk to them. I mean, so yeah, I just completed the whole process. It took less than a year, to be honest. And I always thought I was told it was a horrible process, and the VA had a lot of paperwork and red tape, but it was, they fixed it. I think they cleaned up a lot of it. So, recently, got my VA rating for service-related hearing loss, bad knees, bad back, and PTSD, surprisingly. I mean, like I said, I still kind of struggle with the fact that I know men and women, but most of my counterparts are men that were in Afghanistan, were in Iraq, had ambushes. One guy I interviewed on my podcast stepped on an IED, lost a leg, almost died 3 times. So I look at that, I'm like, who am I to think I'm qualified for any benefits? But according to the VA, I am. So I'll take it.
Yeah, and that's interesting as well, because I know there's the imposter syndrome or the guilt. If someone's been injured or fatally injured, and you think that should have been me. That shouldn't have happened to him. He was a good guy. I should have been there. I should have taken the bullet. And I think that's a struggle as well, which is often caused by PTSD and other things, or from my experience anyway. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. You're right. And I have a niece that's a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I talked to her about this. And I said, why do because I've talked to men that are in the same squad, they were in the same battle, that same place, same battle. One of them is just maybe not the right word, but they're a mess. I mean, they can't hold a job. I mean, extreme PTSD. The guy right next to him, you would never know. They're kind of normal. But we were talking about how everyone has different filters, everyone has different coping mechanisms. But even the guy that looks like he's got it together, he could be a mess on the inside. He's got other demons he's fighting or she's fighting. So yeah, it's, I think we just have to be respectful that everybody has a different story. Everyone has a different journey. But if if you're listening and you have dreams, or you have thoughts or memories that are bothering you, or maybe impacting the way you interact with your loved ones or your friends and family, I'm sure there's, use your resources. There's resources out there to help you cope with that.
And what I've discovered as well through the training I've had in coaching, and when I'm advising clients on finances as well, like for instance, here there's probably a hybrid of 4 meetings going on, right? When you're talking, it's the meeting you think you're saying and what I'm listening to, and then it's the meeting, it's my reply I'm giving, and then what I think I'm saying and what you're hearing. So whenever, like going back to the situation where they're in the same conflict, there's so many different filters going on that it just, some people are affected one way and others can be affected extremely, so they just can't function.
That's true. That's true. And yeah, like I said earlier, I think, just understanding that we all have a different story, having some grace and understanding for each other is important. Supporting each other is important. Check on your battle buddies, check on your fellow veterans. That's so important.
So so you're married, right? You're hopping around from a few bases, I suppose. How's your marriage? How's your marriage stacking up, holding up to these postings?
Yeah. Well, I think, the military made it real clear in the beginning, and having lived near soldiers when I was young, before the military, I feel like I knew, my expectations were set properly. I knew what to expect. And, in fact, I even looked back at my civilian career and felt like every 3 years I expected either a promotion or a new job. Something easy. I got in this routine of every 2 or 3 years, either a new job or a new unit. You just don't get comfortable. You're always in this state of learning something new, meeting new people, having a new mission. And I loved that. I really did enjoy it. I was very fortunate. I think for only spending 10.5 years, and I say only because there's so many people I know and look up to that spent 30 plus years, and God bless them. But from 2nd Infantry Division to the 101st Airborne Division, the 3rd U.S. Infantry Division, and then ending up at the 82nd Airborne Division. I feel like I had a great run. So for me, I went in wanting that. So I never felt like I struggled with it. My wife I think she had more challenges with it because she had to pick up. We started having kids, and in fact, they kind of jumped to the chase there too. I think I was at Fort Bragg. I've been a staff sergeant for a year in E6, and my wife says, "Honey, I'm pregnant with our 3rd child." So I'm like, wow, it's hard enough for 2 kids on an E6 pay. And she was having, she was working part-time. The kids were toddlers, they were young. And it didn't help the fact that even though I was in this great unit that I so wanted to be a part of, I was in what you call an overstrength MOS. I was 11 Charlie 3 Papa. I was a more indirect fire mortarman. I was a section chief, FDC chief, and my job was to help calculate the flexion and the elevation for the mortar systems to put the rounds on target. And but they didn't have a job for me. They had too many of us. So I ended up being the sergeant major's, we'll call it errand boy. I'm sure somebody there's a different term it could be used. But he's like, well, yeah, you can be like the assistant training NCO for the battalion. So I'm like, hey, you know what? At the time, I still thought I wanted to be like my grandfather and go the distance and retire. I thought, man, this would be good. I get to hang out with the sergeant major. I get to hang out with all these first sergeants. As a lower enlisted man, that's something you don't get to do that often. So I'm at the battalion talk and the brigade areas, and I get to hang out with all these guys. And but then it started occurring to me. Started thinking about it. It's like, gosh, I've already been to Korea. I've been to Desert Storm. My poor wife, she's raising these kids by herself. I'm not really doing the job I want to do. I wanted to be in the field. I wanted to be on the line. And here I am in the rear with the gear, as they say. And
Yeah.
so I was up for reenlistment, and I was like, I don't think I'm going to do this. I don't think I'm going to reenlist. Um, at the time, my wife's brother was not in the military, but he had this great job. He was making great money. He was going on these trips with his company, and I said, hey man, what do you do? I like the lifestyle you have. I mean, you drive nice cars. I can barely pay my bills, and trying to make a long story short, Tim said, hey Chris, I think you should go interview at my company. There's a job opening to go door to door to homes selling cable TV and high speed internet. And I'm like, okay, I don't know much about either one of those, but if you say so. So I applied for the job, go to the interview. Turns out the hiring manager was a Vietnam veteran, and he
Wow.
was over the moon that I was from the 82nd Airborne and a Desert Storm veteran. And he basically gave me the job on the spot. He goes, I'll teach you the technology. I'll teach you how to do the job, but I just know what you're capable of. And that's the whole story we could get into. But I was very fortunate. Again, that was the beginning of I'm still in that space today. Gosh, some 25 years later, because of that interview and that opportunity, I'm still in technology sales today.
And before we move on to that, because that's how you transitioned, which you've pretty much succinctly put together, I do want to explore that a little bit more. I'd like to go back to your time in Korea, right? Because there's a lot of stuff goes on between North and South Korea, isn't there? And
Oh yeah.
it's very interesting, especially when you're at the sharp point, which is where you were. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So
And for operational purposes, what you're allowed to.
absolutely. Yeah, we'll keep OPSEC in mind. Fortunately, I was, lower ranking, so I didn't, there wasn't a whole lot of top secret stuff. But to clarify, I went to Korea twice. So I went there as my first duty station, and then right before Fort Bragg, I went back. So I really had, again, at the time I wasn't really happy about it. It's an unaccompanied tour, and both times the Army, I think, was punishing me. I felt like the first time I gave up my Ranger assignment. Again, looking back, that was a mistake. Should have done it. So if you're a Ranger tab, you're a Ranger battalion. Yes, I get it. I should have gone. I didn't. So anyway, the Army sends me to Korea. And the first tour, that was 88, 89. I was in the 506 up on the DMZ. Yeah, we had alerts. We had regular alerts. It could be once a week, once a month. There were very, very different intervals. And there was some tension going on in North Korea, even in the late 80s. And the Tiananmen Square in China was around that time frame. I think we went on alert that night. And so sometimes in the back of your head, you're like, is this a drill? They never really told you if it's a training exercise or if it's a real deal. I mean, when we had drills, we handed out live ammo, and our barracks was right there on the DMZ. So at the time, it was a 4.2-inch mortar system that we were firing. So it was a really big, it was at the time the largest mortar system that the military was using. They later transitioned over to 120 millimeter mortar and retired the 4 deuce, we called it. So my job was, when the alerts went on, the 11 Bravos, the ground pounders, they would go on patrol of the DMZ, and we would follow them with the mortar systems in case they got in trouble, and we would, drop rounds. I mean, that's how it works. But I'll never forget, it was Christmas Eve, and in the mountains surrounding us, we were like a mile from the North Korean soldiers. They had speakers, and the speakers would play propaganda. And quick stories on that. During the day, you would just hear this lady's voice talking in Korean. And we had Katusas, Korean augmentees to the U.S. Army. So we had Korean soldiers, ROK soldiers, Republic of Korea soldiers co-located with us. They were in our squads. Which was great. I mean, we had interpreters, we had guides, we had people to help us with the culture. It was really smart. I love that approach.
Yeah.
So I would ask my fellow Katusa, my battle buddy, I'm like, hey, what is she saying? Oh, they're telling the North Koreans are trying to tell the South Korean soldiers to kill you, that you're here to take over our country. And it's all propaganda, just like over and over. They're just all they talking about how we should rise up and overthrow the American government. I thought, what do you think about that? And they're like, oh, we know it's all lies. We know. So it's funny to us. Okay, that was checkpoint one. And then on Christmas Eve, they're playing Bing Crosby, I'll Be Home for Christmas. And my naive 18-year-old self, I'm like, I thought the propaganda was supposed to be bad. This is kind of nice. They're playing Christmas music, Christmas Eve. And I was on guard duty at midnight. I remember at midnight, and they're playing I'll Be Home for Christmas, and then Holy Night. And then my Korean soldier friend comes down and goes, yeah, they're trying to make you depressed. They're trying to make you homesick. I'm like, oh, well, it's not working. I mean, I know why I'm here, and I'm okay with it. And if anything, it's just bringing back some fond memories, so it's kind of funny how that moment, being there at that time, man, but I really learned how to soldier that year. I mean, I went from basic training to jump school, which jump school really means, you get a little extra pep in your step when you're airborne, right? You just think you're better than everyone else because you're airborne. And that's a whole nother joke we could unpack. But so yeah, airborne soldiers, especially young soldiers, man, you're taught, hey, you're willing to jump out of a plane in the middle of the night, wearing 80 pounds of gear. Other people don't want to do that, so that makes you're more tough than them. That's what you think. So I'm in Korea at that time, and then man, there was no joking, because this literally, even now, a lot of people don't realize there's no peace treaty signed between North and South Korea. It's just a ceasefire. So we were told there, hey guys, this could go bad any minute. You need to always be ready. So for a young soldier, that's pretty, it's like, wow, this got real quick. I mean, you're not, this isn't training anymore. So again, I just really learned the value of adapting, overcoming, persevering, how important it is to trust the person on your left and right. And so real quick, I felt like I grasped that.
Because I remember we used to say, well, what do you want to jump out of a perfectly serviceable aircraft for? And by the way, I did it. So yeah, but that was always a standing joke. Coming back to the drive, we have Driving Home for Christmas, Chris Whittaker, right? Which always reminds me of going back to see my kids, and wife when I was in the military. And I get with you being on a quick reaction force, because when back in the 80s, when the Cold War was on and we were Western Germany, I actually served a few times in American bases on site guard, and we never knew whether there was nuclear stuff in there or not. All we knew was it was possible. And we had, and like Colditch, the big towers all around the perimeters, well, we took it in turns. We were on that for 12 hours. Then we'd come off, we'd do quick reaction force for 12 hours, and then we'd have a rest for 12 hours. And that was like that, just rotating like that. We were exhausted after that.
They really tested your mettle, we call it. And by the way, another continuation of your joke about jumping out of a perfectly good aircraft. I was talking to a crew chief on a C-130, and I made that comment. He goes, by the way, there's no such thing as a perfectly good military aircraft. Because sometimes it's amazing these things don't fall out of the sky. So I thought, oh, that's comforting to know.
Yeah, that's true enough. Especially if you've met some of the aircraft technicians that I have. Certainly. So we're back to 1988, and you've decided to get out of the military. And what's going on? Because how soon after that period of decision did you get to go and talk to your brother-in-law and then get the interview?
Yeah. So it was 1998 actually. So I met Fort Bragg.
Yeah, sorry, 1998.
That's okay. I went in 88, but so I'm at Fort Bragg, and I'm wrestling with this decision. And by the way, before Fort Bragg, remind you, I was in Korea for a year for the second time, and my wife had pneumonia while I was gone, and we weren't living near family, so she had 2 toddlers, pneumonia. Thank goodness we had some good neighbors that took care of her. But that really ate at me too. I'm like, man.
So how did that go? The second tour of Korea, leaving your wife at home?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I didn't get into that. So it's funny. So the first tour in Korea, 18 years old, mind you, there's no drinking age in Korea, South Korea, for the soldiers. So we trained hard, and then we partied hard. That was the mantra for that 88 to 89. Then I'm E3, young man. Then I go to go to Hunter first, go to Desert Storm, go to the Old Guard, make E5 sergeant, and then I go to Korea a second time. So the second tour, I said, like, I'm not going to drink at all this year.
Do you like coffee? A lot of people tend to spend money on expensive coffees from outlets without even thinking about it. Well, for the price of just 2 coffees per month, you can gain access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joeteams.com now to find out more. That's JOETEAMS.com to find out more.
I'm here under protest because remember I told you the Army I think they use as punishment. The first time in Korea was I turned down Ranger Battalion. Second time they wanted me to be a recruiter. They wanted me to go around and sign up other young people to join the military. I didn't want to do it. And I remember talking to a buddy of mine, I'm like, man, I don't want to be a recruiter. I want to be a soldier. I want to be on the front lines. I want to be doing tough stuff. I don't want to be walking around high schools trying to recruit people. I mean, mind you, that's a necessary job. Someone's got to do it, right? I mean, it's an important role. I'm not minimizing that. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. So my buddy goes, Chris, they're going to send you a form. They're going to ask you about your finances and your personal life. You need to make it sound as horrible as you can. You're in debt. Your wife needs you, and you make it sound, terrible. And I did. And so they're like, hey, yeah, Whittaker, we're not going to put you on recruiting duty because you might have to be in a city nowhere near a military base. And so it can be tougher. It's hard on you. So long story short, there I got out of that assignment. So they're like, great, you're not going to recruiting school. You're going to go to Korea again. So I go to Korea again.
So someone in records, Army records, were having a right laughing on your.
That's right. They're like,
your expense, yeah.
Right. They're like, oh, you're going to stiff us again on something we need you to do. We're going to send you to Korea again. So I go to Korea again. And this time I get signed to the 503rd Infantry Regiment at Camp Casey. And, so it was a much better assignment than the first time. So I had that going for me. And, again, I made this pledge. I was like, hey, look, I'm married now. I got 2 kids. I got a great wife. So I said, I'm not going to drink at all. I'm just going to set a good example. I'm here to do my job. I'm going to help these young soldiers. Cause again, I'm I've been an NCO, non-commissioned officer now for a couple of years. So I was really taking that seriously. And again, not everyone does that. I mean, I felt like I was kind of the exception. Most, again, you're away from your family. There's an excessive amount of bars and booze you can drink. And I just didn't want to be a part of that. So I'm not going to do that. In fact, I got very involved with the chaplain. I volunteered to say, hey, chaplain, what can I do to help? I mean, I got involved with teaching Koreans English as a second language. So I learned enough Korean, conversational Korean. And it was interesting because most of the Koreans, they teach English in school, so they can speak basic English. They just wanted someone to go through Time magazine and explain all the different nuances of the English language, the pop culture. And so that was, man, it was fascinating. I got to do that when I wasn't training. I got to go spend time with the Korean community outside the base. So it was a totally different experience, which made the year go by faster. It was, alcohol, too much alcohol. I feel like maybe everybody has a different story, but generally speaking, using alcohol to drown your sorrows it doesn't come out well. No. It doesn't work well.
No, the bottom of a bottle or the bottom of a glass never really clarifies anything.
It temporarily numbs it, but the problem's still there, right? Yeah. So you need to cope with your problems. So the second tour, as much as I didn't want to be there, I made the most of it. I volunteered at the orphanages. I'd go. It was a really interesting story. Even the orphanages, because remember, it's a 12-month tour. And unfortunately, a lot of servicemen go there and they're either single or whatnot, but they father a child. Well, a lot of them don't even know they fathered the child. So if it's late in their tour, and then they leave, and whether it was a woman of ill repute or whatnot, or just a casual thing, there's a lot of Korean American kids there, and the way it was explained to me was, they're kind of considered second-class citizens. A lot of the ways it was explained to me, the Asian culture at the time, I mean, it's pure blood, right? If you're a pure Korean, then, you're first class. But if you're a half-blood that you're not pure, I guess. So they even had
Okay.
different orphanages for kids that were half American, half Korean. They didn't even get to go in the same orphanages as, kids that were full Korean. And they would only let you volunteer like once a month. They didn't want the kids to get too close to you because these young kids are like 3 to 6, 7 years old. They're looking for a father figure, and it was unfair to the kids that you would get there and get this bond, and then one day you're just gone. They never see you again. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. It broke my heart. I mean, I was like, God, I wish I could adopt 2 or 3 of them, but I could barely pay for enough food for my 2 I had. But
Yeah.
it was a great experience. It really helped me put things in perspective.
That's a brilliant story, because I think that everything that we've experienced makes us who we are now. And you being able to see whether you call it a promiscuous behavior or just something mixing alcohol on a night, and then there's a bit of passion, and then the aftermath, if you like, if that's the right way to describe a beautiful child, but then it's left and then classed as a second-class citizen. I wasn't aware of that, actually. So there must have been a real struggle for you there.
It was. I mean, it was because, like I said, and true story. Mind you, that second tour we just talked about, married, and I had a son and a daughter, and Chloe was like 3 years old at the time. My daughter was 3 years old or so, and I'm in Korea. There was a Korean orphan at one of the orphanages that I would go volunteer. I would like read books, or we'd play games. Reminding me of my daughter. So it's kind of bittersweet. It's like, wow, I can be here for her because she don't have a father, but I can't be with my daughter that needs a father too. So it was an internal battle in a sense. It kind of messed with me. Like, I'm trying to do the right thing here. I'd rather be here helping this orphanage than downrange drinking and getting drunk and getting in trouble. So yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, I kept reminding myself, this is I'm doing the right thing here. And yeah, it kind of helped me with it, I believe. But I literally had a conversation with my wife, like, should we adopt this little girl? And it was like, I don't know if that's going to be a good thing either, because I said, we just didn't make enough money, it didn't make. I thought it might have caused more problems, maybe. So we obviously didn't do that, but I often think of her. I pray and hope she's doing well.
Good. So you come back, your wife's health has been a bit touch and go, really, and she's been suffering, and your kids are still young, and what's going on? And now you just think, I've had enough.
Yeah. So personally, I don't know if I want to call it guilt, but it was weighing on me that I couldn't be there for her when she needed me, and we were raising these kids, and then I'm in a job that I didn't want to be in, and then not to get political, but during that time, the U.S. government was like really cutting the defense budget, and here I am in the 82nd Airborne, and we had Humvees on blocks because we couldn't get tires in. And I told you I was a training NCO, so one of my jobs was to schedule rifle ranges for new privates coming in to go zero their weapons, to fire them, practice, their marksmanship. Didn't have ammo for a period. I mean, just like maybe it was like a week. It wasn't like a long period of time. But
what did you do? Say throw a stone at it, mate. Come on, improvise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You could just you can arm wrestle them or something. But it was discouraging to me, and fortunately, that was a very short-lived period. I mean, we got out of that period where they were like, cutting budgets for training and whatnot. I felt like that was just a short period of time, maybe a year or two. So yeah, all that stuff added up. I'm like, you know what? I think this is, a sign. I've done my time. I've had a great go at it. I'm still in one piece. Oh, by the way, I'm at Fort Bragg, and I'm seeing other retirees walking around, men in their 40s with back braces and walkers and canes. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure going 30 years, is that going to pay off? I mean, yeah, I'll get retirement and I've served my country, but if I'm a broken man, barely making it financially and can't work, I was worried about that. Again, God bless the men and women that do it. A lot of men and women have gotten through it, and that's not their story. But I was concerned about it. And so, yeah, there was probably good 10 reasons. And another reason I ended up getting out, I think I shared with you pre-recording was, so I'm at Fort Bragg. Again, I don't have the job. I'm not doing the high speed stuff that I wanted to do, all because I knew how to work a computer, by the way. The reason he pulled me out to work in the training room was because I had some computer skills, which most infantry guys at the time didn't. It wasn't normal in the mid 90s, because home computers were just kind of becoming a thing. But I loved technology, so I also wanted to go special forces. Again, I was like, I still had this thing in me. I was like, I think I could do more than just be regular Army. And so I go to special forces briefing, and they look over my records, and I do a medical exam, and they're like, again, this was 98, and they're like, hey, these glasses, yeah, that ain't gonna work. And you have a hearing profile in your left ear, yeah, that ain't gonna work. Hey, yeah, Staff Sergeant Whittaker, thank you for your interest, but no thanks, we're not interested in you. So that was devastating too, because I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do now? Since I was 12 years old, I wanted to be this super soldier, and it just didn't work out that way. Had some great experiences, airborne, air assault, had some great units, and I'm still proud of it. Looking back, I'm very pleased with how it went down. It went down the way it was supposed to go down.
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time, though. I was still pretty crushed. So at that point, I'm like, well, gosh, I can't go special forces. I can't be in the job I want. My wife needs me. I all these things. I'm tired of eating hot dogs and ramen noodles for dinner. Yeah. So it was kind of an easy decision to get out. And I remember I told my wife, hey, honey, I'm not going to re-enlist. I'm done here. She was worried. She's like, wait, what do you mean? How are we going to feed the kids? Your only skill set is jumping out of airplanes and blowing stuff up. And I said, look, don't worry.
So that was a supportive conversation then, wasn't it, Amy?
Yes, it was. I'm thinking she would be happy, but she knew it had to happen, but she was rightfully concerned about where's our income going to come from.
Yeah.
And I said, look, if I have to work at McDonald's on the east side in the morning and McDonald's on the west side at night, I'll bring home money. Don't worry. I'm not worried about my work ethic. I'll get a job. And of course, I've been kind of having conversations. I was looking at college. I started going to college to take computer programming classes, and quickly realized that was not my thing either. I was like, that was way more complicated than I thought it was. Because again, computing was becoming a big thing in the 90s. There was a shortage of people that could do it. So I still kind of became, just a basic end user expertise. I would never consider myself an expert in that area. But that's when I started talking to my brother-in-law, and he goes, hey, if you're looking for a job, man, we're hiring salespeople. If you don't mind going door to door, you should interview. Of course, that's where I did, and I got the job. And yes, it was. I'll never forget. There was 30 people. There were 30 guys on the sales team, and because of my work ethic, and it was 100% commission, so you didn't get paid unless you sold something. Right. And that was kind of scary. But I'm looking at these other yahoos going, God, man, these guys are crushing it. They're doing it. Surely I can do it. Which, by the way, was the same mentality I had about jump school. My dad's like, why do you want to go to jump school, son? What if, you can't make it? I'm like, Dad, thousands of men and women have gone through jump school and made it. I'll make it. I'll make it. That's always been my mentality. If anyone else has ever done it, I can do it too. It can be done. So yeah, I get out of the Army and start selling cable door to door. Quickly become the #1 sales guy. Why? Because I was working 12-hour days. I didn't know you could work 8-hour days. Because Army, there was no 9 to 5, right? You work until the mission's done. And that was the approach I had, and quickly became #1. I was winning President's Club trips, and I like tripled my income in 1 year. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing, man. We've made it to the big time. We can go on vacations now. We can go out to dinner. It was a major change for my wife and children. And of course, she quickly became, okay with the fact that I got out. But women, I think some women, that's their job, is to be concerned. They worry about things that maybe men don't worry about. Yeah. But it worked out.
And that's interesting as well, because I had a similar experience, because when I first started, and it was just selling life insurance back in 1988, right? there was no professional qualifications like there are now, which I took in 1993. That's when I started getting that. There were people who could make 2 appointments and close on one of them. And I thought, okay. So for me to get the same ratio, if I was having to have 10 appointments to close one, and they were doing really well, and I wanted to get to where they were, if they had 10 appointments to close 5, then I'd make 100 appointments or 50 appointments to close the same. Because if I wanted to the same as them, I just had to work harder. And as I did that, I got better. Because I got a whole load, a whole raft, a whole library of the reason why they didn't want to do it. So then what I did is I developed, and ethically as well, I would never sell something to someone who didn't need it, but ethically, I would come up with a resolution to show them why this was good for them. And so that resonates with me, what you've said there. It's about just putting the work in, which brings me on to the transferable skills from the military. I mean, like coming back to airborne, right? Or what can I do? I blow things up or I jump out of planes. Yeah, what can I do in Civvy Street? There's a whole lot more you learn about yourself and the strategies and skills you've got. So what did you learn in the military that really brought it home in Civvy Street and made you get to number 1 and triple your income in the first year?
I think, a sense of dedication, understand how, I looked at everything as a mission, in the military, that in the mission, do or die, the mission gets completed. So I had that going for me, but also sometimes worked against me. I think I kind of realized quickly, in the civilian world, not everybody looks at their job that way. They look at it as it's a way to make money. It's a job. I'm not going to kill myself over it. In fact, I had a teammate at that job, at my first job. He pulled me aside and he goes, "Hey man, you're making us all look bad. You need to step it down a little bit." I'm like, "Dude, this is 100% commission, man. I got 2 kids and a wife at home. I got to make as much money as I can. I'm not stepping it down." And so it kind of causes a little bit of a rift. They're like, you're just trying to make us look bad." I'm like, "No, I'm not. You can do what I'm doing. It's not my fault that you can't keep up. I'm going after this hard."
Yeah. I don't want to come down. I don't want to come down to your level. You come up to me.
That's right. You need to rise up to mine. And we had the same thing. You had to knock so many doors to get a sale. I think it was like 25 doors to get 1 sale. So I'm like trying to do 75 a day. I wanted 3 sales a day. Because you do 3 sales a day. My boss sat down with me, Joe Masel. He sat down with me and said, "Hey, here's the math. If you can do this, you can make this much." My eyes got big. I thought, I didn't even know that was possible. It was crazy. So, again, looking back, even that amount of money, it was small compared to today's standards. But back then it was like, God, this is big money. So, sense of duty was a big transferable skill, but I had to learn to soften it up a little bit. I had to kind of learn that not everybody's going to see things the way I see them. And that's okay. In the grand scheme of things, that's okay. And maybe it was an advantage for me, but I still had to get along with my colleagues, my new squad, my new team members. I had to get along with them. So I think, sometimes taking my approach on how to do things from a military standpoint, I had to change it a little bit to do it in the civilian world, because it clearly is different, and in civilian work, if you're 5 minutes late for work, no one really cares. But in the military, you're 5 minutes late for formation, you get written up and you got to do push-ups forever. You might lose. It was a big deal, right? So I had to kind of meet them in the middle somewhere. And then, being a staff sergeant in the Army, I was kind of used to, I won't say being in charge, but I was used to being a part of the organization of making things happen. So being, entry level, basically a private in organization, was kind of weird. I'm like, wow, I feel like I've stepped back. So I really wanted to get into management quick. And so getting into civilian management, yes, the NCO creed that we have, about, my superiors have plenty of time to do their job. They won't have to do my job. The people that work for me, I'll take care of them. I'll provide for them. I'll look out for them. So a lot of that stuff was good transferable leadership skills. But probably the biggest hurdle was trying to get over the fact my expectation was I was expecting the people I worked with to have the same degree of energy and passion for the job that I had. And it just wasn't always the case, So once I learned to kind of meet them in the middle, and I kind of said, okay, I'm not going to change, but my expectations for them, I'll change that, because in all fairness, they don't have the same journey I've had. They haven't gone through what I've had to go through, so I can't expect them to act the way I act. So that was a thing, and and I want to encourage every veteran too. If you find yourself in a rut, and maybe you haven't had that kind of story, I mean, just first of all, look back at what you've accomplished. Just getting through military training alone, you're in that 1% club. I mean, that's the true 1%ers. I mean, you've accomplished something that so many people chose not to even try. I mean, you're capable of so much. As a veteran, you've gone through some tough times, even if you didn't go to combat. You've worked as a part of a team. You've accomplished missions. You went through training. That counts for something, and you got to have faith in that. And you got to believe in it, and just know that you can, whatever you set your mind to. And if you look at getting sober as a mission, or if you look at getting that next best job as a mission, for me, that kind of sets in motion a different thought process. Don't be a victim. You're not a victim.
And also it's about just having the drive and determination, because you were talking about the not lowering your standards, but just understanding on City Street that people operate differently. And I know, like, for instance, when I was in the military, and then I was a higher rank, then when I left and got into City Street, I'm back to private, right?
Yeah.
Or sapper level. And then I've got to work my way up again. Now, how did that go? Because you worked your way up. You had 2 children when you left, and now you've got more. You've got 4, haven't you? And I know you adore your children. So what was the journey, and what were the struggles to get to the next level and to where you are now?
It's funny. It's funny. I like how you worded that question, but I even struggle. I don't know if it was a struggle for me, largely because I never let myself label it as a struggle. And again, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think words have meaning. I had mentors along the way that words have meaning. What you call something is what it is to you. So again, going back to probably the biggest, if I had to call anything a struggle, was this change of how I operated in the civilian world versus how I operated as Staff Sergeant Whittaker with 82nd Airborne. I couldn't be the same guy. I had to be a different guy, but I could keep the same values. I could keep the same beliefs. I just had to act a little differently. I had to soften it up. I hate to say that. Maybe that's, I feel like I had to soften it up a little bit and realize that not everybody's going to function at the level that I wanted to function. So I didn't change who I was. It just changed how I interacted with my new civilian colleagues. And then even as I became a leader and a manager of people, again, in the military, you don't do what I say, I'll write you up and make you do push-ups. In the civilian world, you don't do what I say, that don't fly. They go to HR and complain, hey, you're being too hard on them. You can't talk that way to people. So yeah, I did, that was just an adjustment. And, and in the military, they call it mission creep, or you always have to adjust the mission. I mean, you get your marching orders, or you get your operations order. There's always a frago. There's always that change in the mission. And I think in the civilian world, you have to realize, hey, this mission is always changing. You have to change how you adapt, how you work with people, and how you view it. But at the end of the day, I was that, hey, whatever your boss or whatever your job description is, that's your MOS. And your military occupational specialty. That's your job description. Be the best at it that you can be, and just use all your resources. And but now I felt I was pretty fortunate. Very, very fortunate.
So that's great, and how you've put a handle on that on when I use the term struggle, which brings me on to this question: how do you deal with failure?
Yeah, that's a good one too. That's another good question that I can't say I've been asked and thought about much until now. But failure, you're right. How we label failure is important. I've always thought of it and looked at it as a learning opportunity. It's like, hey, what could I have done differently? That's that, even after the military training, after action reviews, hey, what went right? What went wrong? Who owns this? Who's going to fix it? And there's another saying we probably have all heard. Sometimes we're the hardest on ourselves. So when I fail at something, I think the whole world's looking at me like, oh, he failed, he messed up, he didn't make his number, or he didn't get that mission accomplished. I mean, I feel like everyone's looking at me. They're not.
Yeah.
I mean, if no one, if
Yeah, because they've got they've got their own stuff going on.
That's right.
They don't
No
care.
one cares. No one cares if you failed. As long as there's no loss of life. Generally, no one's going to care if you messed up and you failed at something. All you can do is pick yourself up, continue the mission. What adjustment needs to be made. But still, nonetheless, I still don't like failing. I don't like losing. I mean, I'm still in sales, so I have to realize you're not going to win them all. I mean, once you realize you're not going to win them all, life gets a little bit easier. If the standard is I got to win them all, you're setting yourself up for failure because you're not going to win them all. You're going to have failures. You're going to have foul balls.
And my discovery of that was when I came to terms with the fact that not everyone's going to say yes. So I used to say, when someone said no, I'd say, thank you very much. That is absolutely great. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? I've just said no. I said yes. I said, I am now one step closer and one person closer to someone who's going to say yes.
That's right. You can move on. Yeah.
And I always say, when I get to this point in the podcast, my take on fail is first attempt in learning.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never heard that. I like
it.
And
that's just what you got to remember, because I haven't met anyone who's got it right first time. Some people might look as though they've got it right first time, but there's something that's not gone right. It'll be something that's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's never really, don't get caught up in comparing yourself to other people. To your point, just because it looks like someone's got it all together, until you get to know them, trust me. Yeah. Everyone's got heartache. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's had a hard time in life, maybe some worse than others, but you're right. You can't compare yourself. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday is another way someone put it that I really like. I'm just trying to be better than Chris Whittaker was yesterday. That's the only person I'm comparing myself to is who I was yesterday. Can I be better today? Again, sometimes I have good days and bad days. Sometimes I feel like I go backwards, but once I realize I'm going backwards, I got to quickly adjust and get back on track. So, man, this has been a great conversation, Joe. I'm so grateful that you're doing this for veterans. I think sharing our stories is so important. Encouraging each other is so important.
Yeah,
I love what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Because and that just reminded me of something. What you did yesterday helped you get better, so you could do a good job today. So it'll be even better tomorrow, and that's the same, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's always striving. So, and I've picked up, because we've had a few conversations now. I've picked up on what drives you pretty much. What's the secret to your success?
Wow. Secret to my success. I'll try to keep it a short answer. I can make it a long answer, but one, I'm a person of faith. I believe in God. I pray. I believe my family support. Trying to make decisions that are have a positive impact on my family. I mean, those two things alone, I feel like there's a lot of good that can come out of that. Having a positive mental attitude. I just refuse to get in a slump. I mean, again, I've been doing it for so long, it's easy now. It comes second nature. It wasn't always easy. But the more you do it, it's a habit. It becomes it's my habit. It's my natural inclination to look on the bright side. I'm always looking for the silver lining. I can tell you so many horrible situations that I found the good news, the good news. Sometimes the only good news is I'm still alive. I have breath in my lungs. I have a chance. I can get out of the situation. That's the silver lining. So positive mental attitude, having a good, strong spiritual relationship, and a good family relationship. And those three things to me, that's my secret sauce. And it's not even a secret. It's nothing unique to me. I feel like anybody can have that, right?
Yeah. And because I'm grateful that I'm coming on your podcast as your guest as well. And see, the thing is that the podcast that we do now, even though they can always be improved, look pretty slick and it flows. The first podcast I did, I was terrified when I hit that button. I thought, oh, is this going to work? What's going to happen? The technology, you know, I'm like, we've been having some struggles to get together on this, and it never bothered us because I never got wound up about it. You didn't. We just thought, right, how are we going to get over this? What can we do to make it work? So we just carried on and cracked on until we got the solution, which I think is the one transferable skill that we get from the military.
Good point.
The mission
Yes.
has got to be accomplished, and there's no tea in can. You know, it's just got to happen. And what does the future hold for you now?
What does the future hold for me? You know, I feel like I'm in the back half of my career. I'm a grandfather now with 3 granddaughters.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, but one was born this week. You know, my 3rd granddaughter was born
wow.
this week. So that's exciting times. You know, I think you know, my relationship with my children, they're all adults now, you know, so I told them all, I was like, look, yeah, I've been where you are. I'm still your father. You're an adult now. You're responsible for your own decisions, but look at me as your coach now. I'm more of your coach. I can tell you what play to run, but if you don't run it, then that's fine. It's you have to live with the consequences. But so I want to be the best coach I can for my kids and now grandkids. Continue to, you know, just learn to be a better husband and a better friend, best friend to my wife. And yeah, you know, it's so funny because you know, I feel like retirement's in grasp. You know, I can see it now. You know, it's less than, you know, maybe 8 years or maybe max 10 years from now if I'm lucky. I can't even think about that right now. I'm like, I still got a lot of work to do. I have a new role with the new company I've been about 6 months at. I'm very excited about that. You know, I have a whole new mission. I mean, again, I think that's another thing. Always have a mission. You know, that mission maybe just cut the grass this Saturday, but have something to work towards, you know, at the smallest level. Yeah, just I got to clean the garage out. To me, that's a mission. In fact, I'm uneasy until I get it done. I mean, it literally, I can't rest. I can't sit down if I know I have a mission that I put on the mission sheet that I haven't done yet. You know, so that mission could be anything from cutting the grass to being a good husband or spouse. Yeah, I'm going to continue. I'm going to continue on my journey. You know, I just want to be the best I can be and learn from my mistakes and be humble, be kind, as when a country song says. You know, but that's it. You know, where can I add values is something that I get a personal satisfaction of. How can I help? And that's why I was so excited about meeting you and this conversation. I love to talk, as you can tell. I hope I didn't ramble too much, but I hope we could add value to someone listening. Just know people count on you, man. I mean, you know, our lady, or sister, or brother, people counted on you in the military. They count on you now. They need you. We need you. Veteran suicide is a big concern of mine. I wish I had an easy button there. I don't know what the easy button is. Again, everybody has their demons they're fighting, and I can't judge that, but encourage everyone to just know you have a mission. We need you.
Yeah. Thank you. And just before the Columbo question, which is, just one more thing. How can people get in touch with you if they want to touch base? What's the best way?
Yes. Whitta002 at me.com, CWHITA002 at me.com. I'd love to hear from you. Also, thewirelessway.net is my podcast website, thewirelessway.net. You can reach me through there. And even all the, you know, check out my podcast. Again, I can't wait to have you as my guest in the near future. It's called The Wireless Way. And I talk mostly about a lot of technology, but I always have human interest stories. I have some great I have 2 great veteran interviews on there that they're yin and yang. I felt like they have different outcomes, but they're very insightful, inspiring. So yeah, thanks for asking.
That's great. And then finally, you've given some great tips, and we've dragged information out of each other, both of us, during our chat. What's just one tip you would give to a veteran or someone's coming out of the military, or just someone who's in business or maybe just having a tough time and wants to know how to get even better? What's the one tip?
The one sentence, that's tough for me. But that positive mental attitude has served me so well. You used the word earlier at the very beginning, fantastic. That's one of my favorite words in the English language, fantastic. And if I could, Joe, if you guys could hang with me just for another couple of minutes. When I was in ROTC, Colonel James Bowers was a mentor of mine, full bird colonel, Vietnam veteran. And no matter what time of day, anytime hey, Colonel Bowers, good morning, sir. How are you? Fantastic. Fantastic, Whittaker. I'm doing fantastic. And one day, I saw him getting out of his truck and he was kind of limping and he had a gash on his head. He was bald, had a similar hairdo, right? So he had a cut on his head. And good morning, sir. How are you? Fantastic, Whittaker. I said, sir, forgive me for asking, but you don't seem like you're doing fantastic. You're limping and you got a bad cut in your head. What happened? Are you okay? And he goes, look, Whittaker, as long as I can stand up in the morning and take a deep breath, I'm always fantastic. And the more I say it, the more I start to believe it.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought he was a little crazy. I was like, he's lost his mind. He's crazy. But I adopted that. And even the first Army Commendation Medal I ever got, my first award in the Army I ever got, this was back when, if you're in the U.S. Army now, the citations on the awards are kind of like, there's a boilerplate. It's like a standardized blurb. Well, there was a time where if you were the guy given the award, you could actually customize and write something unique to that situation. So my platoon sergeant said, Whittaker's performance can be summed up in his own words. Fantastic.
Oh, wow.
That blew me away. I mean, I was like, he was right. He was right. Because even in Korea, 18 years old, partying too much and working really hard, I always had a great outlook on life. I was always fantastic. Again, remember, your words have meanings. What you label things have meaning, have power. If you say you're having a terrible business year, sales are down, employee morale is down, and if you just sit on that, then you're right, and that's what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But if you say, hey, I'm going to put a plan in place, I'm going to improve morale, I'm going to improve business numbers, sales numbers, I'm going to put a plan in place, and you have a positive forward momentum, I think that is the most powerful thing. Outside of the spiritual realm, I believe prayer trumps that, but for what you could control, that gives you peace.
And that's a great tip. And funnily enough, I always sign off, like emails or anything, have a brilliant day. Always.
Yeah, I love it. I noticed that, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, because it's just, what else would you want to do?
That's right.
What other type of day would you want on this earth than a brilliant one?
That's right.
Well, listen, Chris Whittaker, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic time. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a great way to start this day off. And thank you. I really appreciate it. You're doing great work.
Thank you. And for you listening, have a brilliant day until the next time. Thank you. JoeTeams.com is a resource I have created to fulfill my mission to help 1 million veterans and business entrepreneurs like you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. JoeTeams.com is jam-packed full of valuable resources specifically designed to help you on your journey to success. Visit JoeTeams.com now to find out how you can join and start your journey to success immediately. That's JoeTeams.com, JoeTeams, JoeTeams.com. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.